So we are beyond thrilled to welcome this next guest. He is the author of Exotic Betting and Betting on Myself. He worked at the Daily Racing Forum for a long time. He's one of the most sophisticated, smartest horse players I've ever known, and he's one of my personal heroes. Steve Crist, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be on with you guys.
We're so glad to have you. You know, I miss your writing, but I'm glad you're having a good time in retirement. You own some horses too. We're going to get to that one horse in particular who had a lot of success last year. But I want to ask you mostly about horse player questions. Like I said, you're horse player emeritus as far as I'm concerned in this business. CAW wagering is a big pressing concern, I think, for a lot of regular horse players. We've talked about it a little bit on this show. Basically, algorithmic wagerers affecting pools later than you're able to see the odds and adjust your plays. I guess just my question is there a fix? Is there anything that we can do to negate their advantage and negate their impact in the pools? Because I do think it's driving a lot of people crazy.
Justifiably so. It's made the game a lot tougher. I'm really of kind of two minds about it. On the one hand, my hat is off to anyone who can beat this game. And, these guys have figured out a way that if they can get to, 90% return on their money, that then they get, rebates that take them over 100%, and they can, grind out a small profit on large volume. On the other hand, what you've effectively done with their accounting for as much as 30 or 40% of the pools, at some major tracks, is that it's raised everyone else's effective rate of takeout from 20% to 30%. And that's going to drive people away. The only solution I see, you can't just tell these guys to take a hike, because then your handle goes down 40% next year, and the industry's in a lot of trouble. The only, quote unquote, fix I see is what NYRA's tried to do by just keeping them out of some pools. Basically the CAW players own the early pick 5 pool at NYRA, and they're not allowed to play, at least in theory, the late pick 5 at NYRA. So, if you're a discriminating player and, it's important to you what the effective rate of takeout is, at least you can choose a pool that the CAW guys are not in.
And Steve, with regard to, you having such a history of knowledge, and I'm going to ask you an overview question of our industry. There are so many issues right now that have beset our industry, from a decreasing pool of foals born every year to some racetracks going under, to management, to the horses being or trainers going to jail for allegedly drugging horses, not allegedly, for drugging horses. Where do you see a problem that is fixable, that will kind of set everything else in motion in the right direction?
Well, I think there are a lot of good things going on in racing, primarily in the area of safety. The numbers we're starting to see about, reduced breakdowns, for a variety of reasons, caution and more vet exams and HISA and other things. It really looks like, those numbers are starting to come down. And I think maybe, the more that we trumpet that a little bit, the happier we can all feel about the future. I'm one of those people who believes in general that science and technology will save us, and I think we're heading in that direction in horse racing. So I'm more positive than a lot of other people.
Yeah, this is a question that it's probably unanswerable in terms of a specific data driven answer, but just anecdotally, I feel like since HISA has come around, you're seeing a lot less of these run off the screen, first off the claim, huge move ups. It still does happen from time to time. I can think of 2 guys in general, in particular in New York, who went away for a while and came back and are still moving up some horses, but that's another topic for another day. Steve, how do you feel as a horse player? Do you feel like you're getting a fairer shake and are not having to handicap the trainers as much, or do you still think we have a long way to go?
No, I think that we've seen improvement in that area already. I'm not, going to talk about specific trainers, but people who I had trouble with in the past in their ability to move up horses in unnatural ways, I'm honestly seeing less of that. I mean, yeah, we have some really good training, claiming trainers in New York. And I personally think, Rick Dutrow and Linda Rice are terrific horsemen. You can't say that any trainer who moves up horses off other people, is doing something nefarious. But I'm not seeing from some less people who used to, just send out horses to do kind of unbelievable things. I'm seeing a lot less of that these days.
Right. And Steve, something else that we've been talking a lot about on the show, speaking of trainers, is the advent and development of super trainers. Good or bad for the industry?
Well, it's kind of a fanciful point of debate. I mean, you're not going to change it. It's a model that works, and it works for a lot of big owners and large stables. So, it's here to stay. I mean, yeah, would it be better if we had more trainers and more trainers represented in big races? Yeah, but how are you going to make that happen? I mean, I think the genie's out of the bottle on that one.
Yeah. You wrote an interesting op-ed for the TDN last summer. It's called An Argument for Dirt, which is a letter to the editor by Steve Crist. This is it. You kind of made the argument that Bob Baffert made back in the day that, and I actually, I tend to agree with this, that synthetic makes good horses look mediocre and mediocre horses look good. It's like levels the playing field in I think an inauthentic way. And it's not as much of a proving ground as dirt racing. On the other hand, just on a pure numbers standpoint, synthetic tracks have proven to be the safest in terms of preventing breakdowns. You made the point that it's not apples to apples, and that those numbers include a lot of lower level dirt tracks where the dirt isn't maintained. Can you just expound on that? Do you honestly think that we can get to a point where dirt racing is as safe as synthetic in terms of preventing catastrophic breakdowns?
I absolutely do believe that. And I think that's what we're starting to hear from the track surface experts and Mick Peterson and those people, that there's no reason that dirt can't be as safe as any other surface. And I think we're moving in that direction, and we're moving quickly. And I think, for people to cite numbers, really from 10 years ago, and to compare brand new synthetic tracks to dirt tracks where they haven't gone down to the base in 30 years. I just think it's a phony comparison. And I'm kind of alarmed and very disappointed that, the idea of expanding synthetic racing in this country has come back. I think it's a bad form of racing. I don't think it brings out the best in our horses. I don't think it's good for the players. And we've lived through this already 10 or 15 years ago in the synthetic era. And there was a day, where people were popping champagne corks when, all the major tracks that had synthetics ripped them out, put dirt back in. And I don't know why we're talking about going back to synthetics. I mean, the minuscule difference in numbers that are already outdated, to me, is not a reason to abandon dirt racing, which is the heart and soul of American racing. And, even when people talk about bloodlines in Europe, well, where did the talent come from? In many cases, it came from American dirt horses.
Just want a quick follow up on that, because, I'm of the same belief that I thought it was a disaster to replace dirt racing with synthetic tracks. And I think that kind of worked its way out over time, and the right result came around. But I do think that there's a potential for the synthetic as a third surface. Belmont's putting in a synthetic track so they can continue racing in the winter on a theoretically safer surface. Do you think there's any role for synthetics whatsoever, not as a replacement for dirt racing, but as a third surface?
Well, I think that, for off the grass races, for really inclement weather. I mean, I understand why you race on a synthetic track in Toronto. And I hope that what they're thinking of it for in Belmont is for, off the grass races, in the spring and the fall. And, as a second surface in the winter, I think racing needs a third surface like a hole in the head. You start having divisions of synthetic against dirt and turf. You're going to have fewer opportunities. You're going to have more trouble filling the dirt in the grass races. I don't think we need it as anything except a backup for weather and off the turf.
Right. And that's actually, Steve, it's interesting you say that, because that's actually something that Joe and I were talking about earlier on in the show, is the fact that, these, like Gulfstream's a perfect example. They went ahead and they instituted the synthetic track with the idea that if racing comes off the turf, it's going to go to synthetic. And what's happening now is that they can't get dirt races to go. They just don't have, enough horses there that want to run on the dirt, or more preferring to run on the synthetic. Is that the trend you think is going to happen, like at Belmont?
It's not exactly as if any jurisdiction has an overflow horse population these days. Right. Look, Naira does a good job of cobbling together cards with a small population in the winter. But I really think if you offered a condition book with 3 types rather than 2 types of racing, these races would get even thinner. And you end up with cards even on big days. I think Pegasus Day at Gulfstream, they only had 4 dirt races out of 13 or 14 races. And I don't think that's a good trend.
Yep. Yeah, that's agreed. Like, I think that's the worry, is that it slowly subsumes dirt racing and replaces it. I was watching the interview, such as it was, with Mike Rapoli and Pat Cummings yesterday on Jonathan Kinchin's show, and it took a long time to get to the point, as it usually does. But one of the things they talked about was modernizing the wagering menu, which is intriguing to me. Having wagers beyond just the things that we've had for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, head-to-head wagering. Obviously fixed odds could be a big part of that. Do you think that there's any merit to that you could create more interest around, like, say, I'm going to bet that this jockey finishes ahead of this jockey for the day, or this trainer beats this trainer, or how about like over under for how many wins a guy's going to have for the meet? Like, just with sports betting in particular, and the popularity of prop betting, do you think there's any merit to having those kind of bets for racing?
I don't think it hurts, but I don't think it's going to create, a new fan base or drive wagering in any meaningful way. But, fine. The more the merrier.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, since you mentioned over, under, and prop bets, Steve, I know you're a big San Francisco Giants fan. So I just saw that Vegas put out the over, under, and Giants are at 82 wins. Are you taking the over or the under? Because it's a pretty competitive NL West there this year.
It's a tough division, but I like the moves we've made. A couple of good signings in the last 2 weeks. I would never put myself in a position to root against my team. So I'd always take the over, whatever the prop is with the Giants. But I think 82 is about a fair number.
Yeah, I never bet against my teams, even though I should a lot of times in the Jets case. Last question from me. So you've had a nice run with Thin White Duke, who is a really nice turf sprinter, multiple stakes winner. Always root for you guys when I see him in the entries. Last summer, he won the Harvey Pack Stakes up at Saratoga. Had a couple other nice runs that summer and that spring. I don't know if you were friendly with Harvey, but obviously he was a legend in New York racing. What did it mean for you guys to win that race with Thin White Duke?
Well, I was not only friendly with Harvey. He was really one of my first friends and mentors around the racetrack. And we did a lot of TV shows together. And he was a big part of my life, my early career. So, the serendipity that the first time they finally belatedly name a stakes for Harvey, for me to be part of the group that wins the first running of the Harvey Pack, that was pretty corny storybook stuff.
Oh man, I loved it. How is the Duke doing? Is he pointing towards another campaign?
Yeah, he's doing great. Our horses, which at the moment are all grass horses, got the winter off. spent it in Saratoga, and they're now back with Dave Dock at Belmont. And as soon as they start grass racing, we'll be in the entries. Our big goal with Duke, at least the first half of the year, is the Jaipur, which is going to be run at Saratoga this year, which works out very well for us because then White Duke's favorite racetrack and distance is 5.5 at Saratoga. And that's what the Jaipur is going to be this year. So we're just looking to get them to that in good shape.
Right. That's great. That's great. Stephen, last question from me. It has to do with the Kentucky Derby group of this year. Are there one or two candidates that you think have the best chance to win? Because it seems like it's still a pretty muddied picture right now.
Yeah, one of the nice things about being retired is that I don't have to have opinions about the Derby 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks out.
Right.
Yes, you do.
Which, I understand that working journalists need to have. I really don't. I like in retirement sort of seriously looking at the Derby the first time about 4 or 5 days before the race, and we'll see what gets. Seems to me there's a bunch of nice horses out there. I watch the preps as they're run, but no, I don't have to try to look smart about who's going to win the Derby this year anymore.
And John, we got to try to look smart for another 2 months now about the Derby horses. Hey, listen, Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show. I meant it. You're a hero of mine. Obviously, your work at the Racing Forum and your seminal works, your books on playing the horses. I don't think I would be where I am today without you and your insight. So appreciate you coming on the show, spending some time with us.
Well, thanks for those kind words, and I'm so glad to see guys doing a show geared towards the player, and we need more of that.
Yep. We'll try to carry that torch, man. Thank you, Steve.